So it's quite an unsettling music clip.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It was quite. It's quite. It was a long time ago. I saw it. This last video, the entire one. It's still quite emotional to watch it. To be honest, it was a really. Yeah, it was an emotional process.
Yeah, well, let's start there. I mean, so you basically did the costumes.
Yeah, together with Niklas Nilsson, who's my sort of partner in a lot of my work, even in my also in my set design for my own films. He's been quite active. So yeah, we do many things together.
And how did that project come about?
Yeah, basically, I studied fine arts that time, and this was in 2015. So I just sat in my tiny studio in school, and I was about to write some sort of master's essay or something, and then the phone rang, and it was just like, yeah, this is David Bowie's producer. We would like you to, like, we saw the Fever Ray costumes, like from, I don't know, like, 5 years ago. So I like, neither me or Niklas are really like costume designers, everyday costume designers. We like don't even know how to really make costumes. It's we basically just like glue things onto some poor artist. It's just very much like some sort of a sculptural process. So yeah, but so she called me and just like, yeah, would you like to do this this video? It's like lots of costumes, and I can just put up a studio for you in New York tomorrow. I was just like, no, or I mean yes, but it's like it's still. I'm so used to just sitting in like a tiny cellar and finding crap at flea markets, that sort of budget. But that has also been like the way for me to work. So like. I didn't know anything else at that time.
Wow. And so, but your background was in prop making and set design, and then you made the transition to animation. So
yeah,
I'm interested in what that process was, the transition process. What made you decide to become an animator?
Yeah, so I come from a family that's quite, like, my parents are, like, my dad is an artist, and my mom and him had a gallery for a long time. So I sort of grew up in a quite bohemian way, like spending time with many other artists. Like I had a lot of art around me, and I felt very much that when I grew up that I was like never going to be an artist myself. I was like, no, that's way too just like abstract. But I really wanted to do something creative, so I started studying prop making, which is making stuff for theater and film productions, because it was like something that you could be really creative within, but it still had like quite clear framing and a deadline and like an employer, so I was quite into that, but then when I studied that, I made like a very basic puppet film as like my exam work, mainly to just have some sort of like portfolio to show possible employers, like this is sets that I make and like models and puppets, but then I sort of realized that I just love to make these worlds. I love to make these models, and I love to make these puppets, and it was such an interesting experience to just see how you can use that, your love for materials and building things, combined with your interest in film and to like tell stories. So my interest doesn't come like really from animation itself, but more just to be able to like, I just love to build things and like I'm very tactile, and just to have something to do with that or like to do like something to do with what I'm making.
But going back to like Las Palmas, the film, the penultimate film we saw, that looks like it would have been a crazy project.
Yeah, that was a crazy project. Definitely.
So that's about 8 or 9 years old now, that film. I think.
Yeah, it was from
2011, was it?
2010, I think.
2000.
So yeah, it's almost 10 years, I guess. Yeah, it's such a great film, isn't it?
And that's
It's
the
like-
director's daughter.
Oh
in
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
film.
And me myself, I have a daughter right now who's like the exact same age, and it's just like I think about that every day. Like he's such a genius. I mean, it's like so much fun to like, because that age is so like they do such weird things constantly, and just like yeah.
So you made the puppets? Or
Yeah,
helped
I made the
making
puppets.
and
It
that
was
film?
like a very, very intimate and like tiny project, since obviously it's like all about a very small child. So every day was just supposed to be like a playground for her to enter, and like if she wasn't up for it, like we would just like, you can go home, you know, like it was. So we had to keep everything very like small scale, you know. So it was basically just like me and another a colleague, and Johannes, who sort of worked with us for like 1.5 years or something. So she literally like, you know, crawls in and walks out in this film, and like her hair is so much longer in the end. It's really sweet. Yeah. But it was really like, it was I mean, all of these projects, you know, like I guess some part of me can see it from the outside and just like, yeah, this is really nice, but also like this was so much work, and this was so like, that scene was so horrifying to make, you know. So like there's so much work behind, you know, yeah, everything basically. And it was like, yeah, it was a really special project, and just yeah, especially with this kid, obviously. Yeah.
So with your films, so the first one was Tord and Tord, and that's based on a short story, is it?
It's based on a short story by my friend Jorunn Berg, who's an artist, and that was quite like, I was sort of looking. That's usually my way to start working with a film in general. That I start with like a sense of like an atmosphere, maybe. So I found this, or like I read her short story, and I found it to be like very close to my idea about how, like, what sort of atmosphere I wanted in my film. But she wrote this short story as a part of an art project she did that was very much about like mental illness, and this short story is very much like it's about like a phase that you go through just before you get schizophrenia, so that you start to like see codes and messages like all around, even if that's not necessarily happening. So it's quite, you know, it's about mental illness and loneliness, and it's quite dark, you know, this story. But I think it's really interesting, that film, because it's my first film, and I premiered it in Annecy. Actually, I was so lucky to do that. But it's just really interesting because when I screened it in Sweden for the first time, everyone was just like lying on the floor of the cinema, just like laughing, you know, so much. And it's like, it's a rabbit with a like, he has trousers, and it's so crazy, like, you know. And because I think in Sweden we're so like the animation culture is so close to like children's culture. And it's like everything is really just cute and fun, which is like fine. But also when I screened in Annecy, like the whole like audience were like just dead silent, and like someone just like laughed one time, and the other person like beside just did like shh, and everyone was like afterwards like, it's very Kafka. It's very Kafka. You know? So it's just sort of interesting to see like how it's received in different countries.
I mean that's one thing that's very striking, I think, about your films, that you use animals as the characters. There's no humans.
No.
Obviously that's a conscious decision, so I was interested why
animals.
Yeah,
I think like for a couple of different reasons. I do like to look at my films as some sort of modern fables, like because like all of my films have some sort of like have quite dark stories. It could be about loneliness, about like existential anxiety, about like some sort of criticism towards our society or whatever. But then like when having these animals, like cute animals instead of humans, I guess you sort of invite the audience into like watching the story like through some sort of cuteness filter. I think, and I think it just like it's I find it a bit similar to these traditional fables where you sort of use the like the kids' stories as some sort of disguise when you were really criticizing like the society or the power. So that's like one thing, and also just I can't really like find a way to make human puppets that doesn't like freak me out. I think human puppets are so scary. So that's reason number 2.
Yeah. And I read somewhere as well that you've got a fascination with extinct animal species.
Yeah, I have. Like I've had a few different themes from like for why I choose certain animal species in my different films. In Bathhouse, I worked with the theme like recently extincted species, which I found a bit fascinating because it's mainly species that just like I didn't know that this animal even existed, and then it died, and I didn't know that either. And you often see like a few of these like examples that are like what's it called, taxidermed, is that called? Yeah. In natural history museums, and it's like maybe they were extincted in the 30s, and they were a little bit like badly stuffed, and they look a bit like weird and dusty. So I just felt that these animals should be in this like Swedish like bathhouse. Why not? And also for the burden, I used the animals that are very common in medical experiments. So yeah, I did a whole lot of very unpleasant research for that subject. Yeah.
So there is I think very big difference between the first 2 films and The Burden, in the sense that there's a lot of use of silence in the first 2 films, and The Burden in fact is a musical, lots of rich music and songs. But the silence I was really taken by the silence, creating that atmosphere of sort of foreboding in the
Thank you. It's like so many people, it's like, The Burden, you really nailed it there. It's like, so I'm really happy that you appreciate my like that work as well, because I'm really aware of that, because I'm really like personally I find it really like provoking when it's like when music is used for no real reason. I think it's like a cheap way of just like making the audience feel certain things, like, and I think that I can get really annoyed myself when you feel it when you watch something that is just like too clear, like how the director wants you to feel. So I was very interested in this sort of like unsettled atmosphere. Like, is this funny, or is this just like horrible or sad, or like it's I thought that was quite interesting to develop, and so I really chose not to use music almost at all. But then with The Burden, I was just like, why not like just go all in with the music for once and just try like a musical thing, because I was just so I just loved musical myself growing up, like this old school like Gene Kelly musicals. So I tried that, and obviously it's like music works obviously for everyone.
Well, so did the music come first for The Burden, or how? I mean, you worked, is it Hans Appelquist?
Hans Appelquist, yes.
So were the songs written first? And
we sort of, I mean, I had like an idea about these different scenes and what I wanted to happen in each scene, and like what sort of feeling I wanted to have, like the first one being quite mellow, and the monkey one being very a lot of people singing and dancing, and so then I took that material to Hans, and also like some references from like, I don't know, West Side Story. And he's actually like, he's an artist himself, and he makes like so good music. You should really watch him up. He's really great, but he makes very like much more like art house-ish music, and so it was just so much fun to sort of force him into making this like, you know, cheerful musical stuff. And also I had Martin Luuk, who's a Swedish comedian, he's also like an author, and I love his writing. So I had him also to write these lyrics according to my instructions. So, and I think that was just, yeah, I was so lucky to work with so many great people in that film, and for like almost no money, because we had such a shitty budget, to be honest. But like, yeah, for that sort of film, which was totally my fault. But yeah, but yeah, I made my own bed, you can say.
But you know, obviously, like the puppets and the sets as well are so meticulous and so huge. It took you 2 years, 2.5 years.
2.5 years for me to finish the Bourbon. I think all like Bathhouse and Torrentor was also like 2 years something, but it mainly has to do as well with just like the sort of budget you get, and when you're forced to work for like quite a long times just on your own, then you know things tend to take so much longer. You know, like folding this like cornflakes boxes, and like, yeah, what did I do today? I folded like 50 boxes of cornflakes. You know, like it's crazy. It's really, it's gets to your head.
Okay, I'm sure there's some questions from the audience. So we do have a roving mic as well, I think. So do you want to just wait for the mic?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, first time I saw Tour de Tour, one thing I really loved was how small the movements were. And it really impressed me that, oh, you know, you can have a gesture, and, you know, it doesn't have to be excessive and tell a story. I was wondering, you have a personal sense of timing with your work, and or do you work with a lot of other animators, you know, on the larger projects, or how do you direct the timing? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I like for the first 2 films I did, like with Torrentor I did all an animation myself. That was like a long time ago. And Bathhouse I sort of did like half the I have like 1 co-animator, and for the Burden I had like maybe like 3 animators, but like I'm trying, like, to be honest, I'm like trying to move away a bit from animating myself, because I feel like I'm so like drained from, you know, like making everything and, you know, writing and directing, so I try not to. I really try to put like the money I have to hire like good animators, but then it also needs to be animators that really understands my my sort of timing, and I'm really careful with like instructing them and like mainly I just use like animators that I really know from before, and like who knows how I work, because I think it's really interesting, because it's like being in the like animation industry for a couple of years now, it's just interesting to like, there's like a really like conservative part of the animation industry as well, who's like, why do you do animation? It's not, you know, their eyes are not popping out and nothing is exploding, and they're not like, you know, why aren't you doing this like sort of cartoonish things like when you can? And I'm not like interested in that at all, and it's it's just I really enjoy to sort of like having the opportunity to do things, but like then choose not to.
That's what I love about it, that you
Thank
don't
you.
do all those things.
I won't. Thank you.
Any more questions from anyone?
What are they made out of? The animals?
Oh, I have the puppets.
Niki actually brought a couple of her friends over from Stockholm with us, so. Do be careful with them, though.
No, it's no worries at all. Don't be careful. But I think they're made of like so many different things. It's that's sort of the annoying thing with making puppets for animation, that like they need to sort of work and not just be, you know, good looking. Yeah, I mainly do my own like skeletons with like aluminum wire, and then I sort of make them thicker with some sort of like faux, like what's that you use in mattresses, you know, rubber foam, yeah. And then like usually when I do like animals with fur, it's like really complicated because they're so tiny, so you can't really use just like a textile with fur and just put on. So you need to sort of like cut like a little piece of fur and then have some glue on it, and then just like, you know, and do like that, and then like cut it down, and that takes like, yeah, it takes forever. But it's I guess I think it's fun. Yeah.
Hi. So you mentioned about being tiny, the size being so small.
Yeah.
When you consider the scale, for example, the one with the baby, Las Palmas, is I think it's easier to understand because the baby is
of course,
set.
Yeah.
But the other two, for example, the mice.
Exactly.
Who specified? Like, how did you dictate what scale would you be working with in that scenario, for example, with the mice?
I've sort of just found my very specific scale during, just during the years. I work with like a very specific scale, which is like 1 to 7.5. I just like found that scale to be really good, but I think it's mainly because I don't have like a big studio. I have a quite tiny studio, and I don't want my sets to be too big, so that's why I need to keep it as small as possible. But I still don't want to lose, you know, the details. I don't want to make, you know, like, you know, bigger puppets for close up and stuff. Like I want to use everything all the time. So I just found that specific scale to be quite like work quite well. It's sort of a like Barbie size, I'd say, but it's also a bit unpractical because you can't really find anything, you know, any ready-mades in that size at all. It's like too big for like doll houses and stuff like that. So, but on the other hand, I've become like this expert in having these glasses on that you sort of like look at trash all the time and just see, you know, different shapes. So it's like, oh, that sort of like cap on the toothpaste would be a great, you know, pot plant thing. You know, it's like you find the shapes in other stuff. Yeah.
Do you still scour flea markets for bits of
yeah.
props?
Yeah, I love that.
Any more questions?
Thanks very much for the movies. Question is, how long does it take to shoot the 10 minutes movie? And did the firefighters ever came?
Sorry, the fire, yeah, the fire truck.
Exactly.
No. The answer is no. And well, it takes, I mean, as I said, I think it takes like between 2 and 2.5 years to like, but that's also, yeah, like because this is such a, like, I'm having quite limited budgets for my work since it's so like horribly like time and effort consuming. It's really not possible to make that happen. So like if I would have had a team with like 10 people, it would have been so much faster, I think. But it also, yeah, I mean, it's also like people usually like asks me like, you must have so much patience, you know, like looking at me like I'm this sort of like super, you know, like slow animal or something, you know. But I feel that I'm like I'm constantly like so stressed out because like these productions, they contain so many different parts, and like you're always like late for something, and you have these deadlines, and so I feel that I'm just like working so fast with everything, even though it takes 2.5 years.
So was the burden meant to take 2.5 years when you started it, or did you go over schedule?
Oh, well, that's also an interesting question, because I'm sort of realizing that I thought about like my first film, and like, did I expect it to take that long? Like Torn, like hell no. But then I was like, yeah, but do I still expect my films to take this long? I think me being so bad at planning and also like so optimistic when it comes to like time, I think that's also like the reason why I keep working, because like if I would have known before how like terrible and long these productions would have been, I don't know if I would have done it. So maybe that's a good thing.
Any other questions? There is a mic.
What's next? What's your next project?
Yes. Actually, it's super exciting. I can't really tell anything about that yet, but it's like I'm starting up like an international production quite soon that will be like in a very much bigger scale all of a sudden, like with like a proper budget and like a little bit longer than these films. So it will be really interesting, like an interesting experience for me to also maybe become a little bit more like this sort of director who has, her, a team, and, instead of just like doing everything yourself. Because I do feel that like when I sit and like make my stuff, I come up with ideas during that time. So it will be kind of interesting to see like how my sort of ideas will if they will be different from like being less hands-on basically. So, but it's very I'm looking much forward to it. It's super exciting. So it will be something bigger. Yeah.
But there is another film as well that you've just
Yes, of
finished.
course. Sorry. Yeah, and I also have I have a new short film. It's a bit shorter. It's 5 minutes, but it's called Something to Remember, and it's I like to describe it as like a lullaby before the great disaster. It was something like it's a sort of a music video that I made right after being on parental leave with my daughter, and it's like very much more like it's sort of fragments from our time. And at first I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I have no idea what this film is about. And then when looking back now, I'm just like, yeah, this is about like parenthood, and this is about being like becoming a parent, that you need to sort of like was sort of like a therapeutical work for like just telling your like very little child about this world, and just like presenting her to this like weird and very like like this strange world that we're living in now. So Something to Remember will have it will have its European premiere like in February, and then it will you will get to see it.
Any more questions?
I had thought that my question was this one from the woman in front of me, but so I'll follow up. Is it a feature, and do you have any ideas that you would make a feature film?
It's this project is this upcoming project. It's not really a feature, but it's longer. I'm also working with a parallel project, a TV series that I'm developing together with Pastel, who's it's Barry Jenkins' production company in Los Angeles, who made he made, for example, oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Moonlight.
Sorry, yes, Moonlight. Yeah, that won the Oscar. And they're great to work with, and I'm developing that also like an animated TV series that will be like a supernatural thriller about the financial world and the next financial crash. So yeah, that will also be really
With puppets?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions from Niki?
Thank you for all the questions.
Thank you. Hello, thank you.
Hello.
I just wonder, could you share like maybe your influences or your artists or filmmakers?
Mm.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I think because I'm not to be honest, I'm not super influenced maybe by other kinds of animation, because I read a lot and I watch like a lot of just like live action films, but also I think just by just taking in sort of like everything, just like everything from the news to like keeping up with the Kardashians, you know, like everything that is just like, you know, our time. I'm realizing that I'm taking a lot of time to just like, I don't know, just look everything up from like popular culture stuff to you know, more heavy stuff. I usually look at, like when starting up a new project, I usually look in my Caspar David Friedrich book, like with his paintings, because I think it's like whenever I'm just like sort of trying to get some sort of atmosphere or like some sort of idea about my images, I just love his work, even though maybe it's not very close to his work, but I do love him a lot. Yeah, for example.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Thank you. I was just curious about when you do the stages, the rooms, the locations.
Mm.
Do you have like a plan in mind, or do you do drawings or of the locations, or do you just start to build them and they develop naturally?
That's a good question, because that's actually like a very important part of my work. Like when I'm saying that like it takes 2.5 years to make a film, it's like the pre-production for me is like almost 1 year, because I also feel that to me like the surroundings are almost more important than the characters. Like the characters are just like there and things are happening to them, but like the surroundings are more important. So and I also like, obviously I'm really interested in making my models my sets very realistic. So when I decide upon like a certain place that I want to make as a set, I go to these places and I document everything. I'm taking like so many pictures and I'm measuring stuff, because it's like super important for me to have like real measurements that I could use for my scale. Because like if something is like just a tiny bit off, it will become something else, you know. So for example, during my bathhouse production, I was like just in so many bathhouses around Stockholm and Sweden where I live, and taking a lot of pictures, and I got like thrown out so many times because you're not really allowed to take pictures in there. So that was a struggle. And like in the Burden, I was really interested in that sort of weird, you know, like just what's the name? It's like a marketplace, or where you sort of have this sort of big warehouses and maybe like this sort of office space and a cheap hotel, and they're just like lying around in the middle of nowhere but just close to a highway, and I was really like fascinated by them. And I think it's also maybe a little bit about places that sort of freaks me out a little bit, and then I it's like I'm just taking them in and just giving them a lot of love and a lot of attention, and then it feels better maybe.
Yeah, just had a question for the Burden. I was surprised by like this kind of light end, like with all of them singing, and the contrast it had with the really at the end when we see that it's like a world apart and just lost in the universe. So I just wanted to know like what was your intention. And
I think I can become a bit like, for two reasons it's hard for me to like speak about it. It's like for for one reason, it's just like I really want everyone to have their own like sort of experience from that ending. I have my own experience, of course, and it's like it comes from like within. It's kind of emotional and kind of abstract, and it has a lot to do with I don't know, like existential anxiety and our littleness in the universe. And I feel that I would like to keep it a bit poetic, and also like since English is not my really like my first language, it becomes even more just like so I'd like to keep it there if that's okay.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
Hello. Sorry, this is going to be a boring question.
Yes.
How do you get your characters to stand up? What with every stop motion animator having their own way?
Yeah, that's actually true. Like usually I'm just having screws. Like I just screw them down to the ground. Then when we animated the tap dancing, for example, that was a bit harder because then they're like jumping all the time. So then we had some sort of rigs from behind and from up that we took away in the post-production. That's a short answer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The tap dancing sequence must have taken a long time.
That took such a long time. It was so crazy. We actually, and also that's not really something that you can just make up as an animator, like a tap dancing choreography. So I asked a really, really famous and great tap dancer in Sweden, Denise Holland-Bettke, to just like, hello, you don't know me, but could you please just make a choreography for me? I have no money, but please, And she was just so kind and did that according to this, like the way I wanted them to move. So she recorded herself and a colleague, and then we used that live footage to just like sort of analyze when I say we, I mean Eirik, who's like a great animator, to sort of analyze each frame. And I think it took him, like the actual tap dancing part is like 1 minute or something, but it took him, I think it was like 8 weeks or something to animate. So it was so horrible. Yeah. And also it was like all of the, like that set is made out of wood and it stands on sort of like a wood construction. And it was like in a very tiny little cellar place where it was quite, moist, it was like a bit wet. And so, and all like, fall turned to winter, so like the set was a bit like it was sort of becoming bigger and smaller because it was like dry and moisty. So it was like, oh no, the floor just moved a lot since last night. It was like such a nightmare with the post-production. Yeah.
Okay, well, once again, I'd like to thank Niki Lindroth von Bahr.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
And hope to see you back here maybe next year with your new film.
Yes, I'd love to come.
Okay.
Thank you.